Hello and welcome to the webinar, Fostering Biological Family Relationships. My name is Courtney Williams, the host of America's Kids Belong's FosterCon webinar series. I'm a licensed foster parent of more than 17 years for more than 60 kids, and I've adopted 6 kids, 3 through foster care. I work at America's Kids Belong to help inspire and equip others to do the same. And on behalf of America's Kids Belong, I want to welcome you to being here today for this webinar. At America's Kids Belong, it is our mission to dramatically improve the experiences and outcomes for kids in foster care. And this event is part of fulfilling that mission as we dive into how to best engage biological parents. As a foster mom, I can honestly say one of the greatest joys is seeing parents who work on their case plan and they're reunified with their children. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's emotional. Once a kid's been in your home for 3 months, 6 months, a year, even if it's only been a few weeks, it can be really hard. However, our goal as foster parents should be to support reunification when it's possible and to be a cheerleader for their parents. Before we get going today, I'd like to review a couple of housekeeping items. First, please take a look at the slide introducing our 3 speakers for today. We are so thankful for each of them and their voices. The conversations are great. They are robust. They're incredible. You're going to hear 2 different conversations. One that I had with Kristen and Brenna, and you're going to watch a recording of Ashley's story. It is amazing and just really hits to the heart. So again, thank you for being here. At the end of the webinar, I also will share with you how to get CE credits. So if you're here and you need credits for ongoing training, fill out the form. Again, I will tell you more information about that at the end, so stick with it. And at the very end, you'll learn how to get that credit. And now I'd like to introduce you to our first 2 speakers today, Kristen and Brenna. And now I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker, Brenna. Brenna is a former addict turned social worker. She lives in Michigan with her 3 children who were removed from her care in 2020. She uses her story to educate people around the removal best practices. Thanks for joining us today, Brenna. You do have quite the story to share. I love following you on social media. I feel like I know you already, even though I hadn't met you until today. But can you just kind of walk us through your journey as a mom, having kids removed, what that was like for you and how you worked on your case plan to be reunified? And yeah, kind of share your story around that.
Yeah, so I typically, anytime I share my story, start off pre-removal because that understands how I got there. When I was pregnant with my first, I was actively using meth and I was living out of my car in California. I didn't get any prenatal care during that time. I had a rough idea of when my baby would be due. And so when that time came around, I drove back to my native state of Michigan. But on the drive there, she was born in Utah. So they tested her meconium because they called me a stop and drop mom, but they didn't get the results back till far after they could discharge. Like they held us in Utah for about 10 days, and then we were discharged and sent on our way. Baby born healthy, no concerns. Got to Michigan, settled in with a relative, and when she was 2 months old, that's when I got my first CPS knock on the door. Her pediatrician had called it in after getting the records from Utah. And at that phase, it was a very small county, so they didn't put me on a randomized color dropping system. She just would say, hey, when can you meet up next? And so I was basically able to schedule when I would drug screen. So I'd usually schedule a meeting with my CPS worker 4 or 5 days ahead of time and then get clean in the meantime because meth does not take long to exit your system. It takes about 4 or 5 days. So then I dropped clean for her. So that case didn't stay open very long. In the meantime, I then got pregnant with my second child. After CPS had closed out, I was actively using meth every day. I feel like this time around it spiraled a lot harder because for my daughter, I was even able to get clean for her birth about 3 or 4 weeks prior to her birth. But this time around, I couldn't even do that. I felt a lot of guilt and a lot of shame surrounding it. I knew that that's not the life that I wanted. I just felt like I couldn't stop. So then they drug screened me at the hospital, gave birth, tested meconium, same ordeal. But this time, because I was dirty at birth, I had CPS come to the hospital. The worker threatened removal immediately at that point. was able to negotiate with her supervisor, as they hadn't done a formal investigation yet on how the substance use was impacting parenting or ability to care and provide for the child. So then my son did come home from the hospital with me, and they kept an ongoing case open for the next 6 or 7 months with CPS. Towards the end of that, I got clean. I'd moved in with a fictive kin relative of mine and was able to get clean for almost 2 months until I had to move out of there. I moved back in with my children's father. I was staying clean. I went to I was in a bigger county at this point, so I was on a color system for this case. And I went to drop, and they advertised that it would be open until 6 p.m. I got there at 5:50, and the worker at the front desk said that the lady who does the drug screens had already left for the day. So I called my CPS worker. She said, well, since you can't drop, then it's going to be counted as positive. And that was just like after a very like tumultuous relationship with CPS, and I didn't feel very supported by them. I was just very fed up because it was like it caused anxiety in me every day. And I was like, here I am finally doing it right, getting it together, and it still isn't good enough. And she's still going to count. And because the entire CPS investigation, my worker would just say, get clean, or my supervisor says we have to take the kids. So just there wasn't a lot of problem solving happening at that time of like bringing up rehab. I did get put into one service, which was helpful, but it wasn't enough to what I needed. I didn't feel like I was being acknowledged for the work that I was doing. So I was very burned out that by this point. It was March of 2020. My kid's father was going to go take a trip back out to California. And after this interaction with CPS, they were going to count it dirty regardless of my attempts to drop. I decided to go with him. I planned to return in 2 weeks, but I cut contact with CPS on my way out there after I was very scared and stressed because I thought they were going to take my kids for not being able to drop that day. About 5 days later in California, a relative got a hold of Michigan CPS and told them where our whereabouts were. So then California DCFS knocked on the door and removed the kids that day. The two states then, they debated who had jurisdiction over the children. And then ultimately it was decided that Michigan did. So the kids were flown back to Michigan. Mind you, this is now, the children were moved on March 9, 2020. By the time they were flown back, it was March 12 or 13, which is when COVID lockdown began. So my 2-week trip got changed from that to over a month because all of the travel, I took the train, Amtrak shut down, so I couldn't get back immediately. I relapsed the day that they were removed. It felt like a survival mechanism at that point, because at this point, for the next weeks following their removal, I was on the streets of Los Angeles. We were there visiting a friend, but things went down and she locked us out of the apartment. I don't need to go into detail there, but so we were stuck on the streets. 3 weeks following removal, I made it back to Michigan. And within the week, I went to rehab. I spent about 7 days there and then was released into a sober living house. So halfway house where you get drug screened. In my state, the first 6 weeks were free. And then it's a minimal cost by the week after that. Mind you, again, it was during COVID. So then around the time that I was being released from the sober house, I got my stimulus check. And I used that to get an apartment so that I was able to at least knock another barrier off the list. Also, the first week in my sober living house, I got a job at a pizza shop that I'd worked at years prior. So I was doing decently well. I've been clean since that day. I went to rehab. That was April 9, 2020. So it's getting close to 5 years. I'm excited about the 5-year mark because that feels big.
Wow.
The case continued to stay open until September of the following year, but the kids returned home in June of 2021. Different barriers I had to overcome was the sobriety, the housing, employment, mental health. So like I saw therapists throughout my time. I worked in a family engagement program where I had a recovery coach, substance use therapist, and case manager that helped work on barriers. And I had to do NA, Narcotics Anonymous. I had to do randomized drug screens. They were weekly for about a year, and then they did it to twice a month, I think, after I was clean for a year. Oh, important detail I hadn't known yet. Around the time that I got my own apartment, I found out that I was pregnant again. So this ended up being my first clean pregnancy. And so while she was born during my foster care case, CPS still had to come and evaluate whether I would be able to take her home from the hospital or whether she would be removed as well. But they decided to let me take her home. So that was a huge milestone for me. I think really benefited me long term.
Wow, that's an incredible story, Brenna. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Brenna, thanks for sharing your story and your journey through that. I'm sure it's not easy to talk about even years later, but it is, yeah, again, we just thank you because we need to hear your side. But I would just be curious to know, what are you up to these days, and how has that journey through the foster care system changed who you are today?
I've since been hired since case closure at the agency that oversaw my foster care case. So day to day life is working here in the system. I was hired just over a year after the case closed. So it was like a little breather and then back here. It's been healing. I feel like I've learned even more skills to help me in life working in the system and with these parents than I even learned during my case. Or maybe it's just the things that I was being taught at the time. I was still going through so many other, like the first year of recovery is huge healing on your body as a whole. So maybe I'm able to take it in, apply it more, and seeing it carried out here now, these many years later. And then day to day, my life consists of taking care of my 3 kids, which I love. So essentially, I'm living. I grew up always wanting to be a mom, but I feel like I'm living it out better than I could have imagined.
Mm-hmm.
I love my kids. I love my job and where life has brought me. I don't like it when people ask, well, are you grateful that that all happened then? Because like, it's kind of a hard thing to be grateful for, but I'm a very silver lining type of person. So I'm grateful for the ability to not dwell on it and just move forward and use these tools every day and make myself a better parent. I'll never be a perfect parent, but I'm a healthy parent now, and that's what matters.
So what is your role in the system? What do you do?
I'm a parenting time specialist, so I monitor parenting times, write reports for court. I do a little bit of peer partner type of stuff where I can help some parents with finding housing, finding resources, just being a general support. So a lot of my job is relationship with parents. I knew before my case was over that one day I'd want to work in the system because I felt like there was not enough people in the system that understood what it was like. I just didn't imagine it would happen so soon. I'm grateful it did.
Thanks again, Brenna, for sharing, and looking forward to hearing more. Okay, we're going to shift gears just a little bit, and we're going to add Kristen Reese to this conversation. Kristen lives in Colorado, where she lives with her husband and her 3 children. She's a former foster parent, and I met Kristen kind of through the fostering realm. I used to live in the same area as her, and I just knew instantly when I started chatting about foster care with her, I could tell that she's very pro biological family. And so when we were putting together this webinar, I knew that she was a voice that I wanted to join in on this conversation, because that is what we want to see from foster families. We want to see foster families who are encouraging to biological families, who have walked those shoes, and who just really see the need for families to be reunified when it's safe and healthy. So thank you for joining us as well, Kristen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Kristen, share a little bit with us a little bit about your foster care journey and what has it looked like for your family.
Yeah, so we are from Wisconsin, and so before we moved, we had everyone in our community was fostering and adopting, and the way that we got into it was just we're helping the families give respite and things like that, and our family just fell in love with being a part of our community. And so when we moved to Colorado 7 years ago, it was only about 6 months, and our kids said, we need to do that again. And so it's really become a family thing for us. And so we were, right away, we got placed with kiddos. We've been open to sibling sets. We've had, I think, I don't know, 13 or 14 kiddos come through our doors in the last 6 years in Colorado, and really, again, what I feel like is kind of our calling. Everybody has a different place in the foster care system, but for us, we really believe in reunification and the strengthening of the family, and how we could just truly walk alongside and just help our community be better. And so that was kind of our heartbeat, is walking alongside families and continuing the relationship between kiddos and their parents, and finding ways to do that well throughout all of our placements. And so it's such a gift. Some end really great and some end tricky, but that really has been our heartbeat throughout all the years.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. As she just spoke to, reunification is the goal of foster care. It's always the first goal. And we really need families who will support that. Like we talked about, supporting the biological families and engaging with them when their children are in care. Brenna, can you give some advice to foster families of how they can best support bio families? What are some things they can do to show that support and encouragement to the families of whose kids are in their care?
Yeah, I think off Jump Street, not judging them based on what they hear, because even if there is like some truth to what you hear from a child or a worker or family member, that information isn't always accurate to who that parent is today or what they're trying to be. And also, dwelling on the past and what has occurred doesn't help move forward and change and heal that parent and whatever situation brought them into care. As reunification comes closer, sending home clothes with the child is very helpful, because I know for me, as I was preparing for my kids to come home throughout the case, you don't know until you're within like 2 weeks of that child coming home that that child is coming home that day. So I'd buy clothes for my kids, and then they'd be outgrow those clothes before they even were able to utilize them. So I feel like that is just a very tangible way to, if reunification occurs, set them up for success. When reunification occurred, there was also some people who did a meal train for me. That was really helpful. I think building a relationship with the parents is really important. Even if you're not comfortable giving your phone number, if you're able to even do one of the transports to visits a week to build a relationship before, after the visit in that way, just to help build that confidence in the parent that you aren't there trying to replace them. You are just there to keep that child safe while they need it. And then maybe over time, you could give out your number and be able to send pictures. Otherwise, sending pictures through the case manager or any other member of the system to provide the family. I feel like that's really important. Making sure that the workers, everybody knows when the next doctor's appointments are, so that we can try and include parents at those appointments when possible.
Yeah, I love that. I personally use a Google Voice phone number that I use just for foster care, and I give it to all of the bio families that I work with right away. I try to start that communication. I think it just opens that door of communication and letting them know. I always say, feel free to ask me any questions about the day-to-day or what we're up to or what they're up to. And I send pictures. And I guess the only reason why I use Google Voice is because I need my sleep at night. And so I shut off my notifications from most of my apps, but we're also an on-call foster family. So I need my phone on, like my actual phone number on. So I use the Google Voice. So I can just kind of shut that off, at certain times and then turn it back on, not shutting them out, but, just sort of shutting it out at certain times of the day so that I can get my sleep.
Boundaries are something that I've seen a lot of foster parents struggle with the idea of, like, if their boundaries are crossed. But I feel like a lot of parents, it's almost like we need to model these things to them. So even setting our expectations when you first exchange, whether it's a Google number or whatever, like, you won't be answering calls, or you'll only be answering on these days, or you can expect pictures on the, like, whatever you're comfortable with, let them know that. And if they aren't abiding by those boundaries, you can gently remind them, because things won't be perfect off jump. Parents might be angry sometimes, but I feel like relationships between two parties, more often than not, there's a way that they can be safely done. It just looks very different case by case.
Funny enough, I actually just was texting back and forth with our placements mom this morning. We message each other almost every day, but we have a young adult or young teen in our house. He's 14. And one thing that these kids often do, if you're in this realm, you kind of know what I'm talking about, it's called triangulation, where they try to kind of like get us against each other. And so we had a meeting just yesterday. I was told that he told his bio mom that I don't like her. And I was like, where did this come from? I heard you said that. And of course, his response is, well, I didn't say that. I never said that. Like, well, where would that even come from? Because everything I've ever voiced to you has been encouraging your relationship, and they've had a tough relationship, so we're trying to encourage them to have more time together. And so I just texted mom and I was like, hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you today. And she was so thankful that I just messaged that and that I can explain to her, hey, if you ever hear something from him that you're like, I'm not quite sure that Courtney would say that, or that's how, please just message me or call me, pick up the phone, call me, because I want us to have that relationship where we can also help your son realize, hey, these people are working together. They're not against each other. They're working together. So it was just a really sweet conversation that I just had today. It made me think about that, of another reason why to have that open communication, because these teens, or even young kids, sometimes they do that triangulation and they can try to paint each other, point each other against each other. And we can often overcome that by just a simple conversation. But that's like, that's not what I said. Yes, I was a little frustrated that he returned home at 10:30 on a school night, but that doesn't mean I don't like you or anything else, So having those conversations is always key. Yeah. Kristen, what would you add to that as a foster mom? What are some ways that you show love and respect, or have shown that love and respect to bio families?
Yeah, I think Brenna said something really great. Being one of the transporters to visits is a huge thing for me. At least the first couple, I always made it a point to go. Really, I come at it from their perspective. I can't imagine not knowing who my kiddos are with and where they are, and who are these people that have my kiddos. And so I really, on the front end, go hard with, hey, can I just introduce myself? And here's my phone number. And if you have any questions, and give the respect and dignity of that parent who knows that child better than me. And so in that first couple of visits, what are their favorite foods? What should I have stocked in the kitchen? What if they're scared or sad? What helps? What songs do you sing? And what do you do? And things like that, just to give a voice for that parent who knows that kiddo. And so that's something that I do a lot on the front end. The other piece I always do at the first couple of visits is I try to get a family photo, especially if there's multiple kiddos involved in separate homes. And that's twofold. It's one, I print that out right away. I give it to the parent as a goal. Like, here's your goal. Keep this with you wherever. We are going to get you back together. I frame it and put it, we have shelves right by all the bunk beds on the walls, and that's where that picture goes. So that every night when they go to bed, they get to see their parent is the last person they see. It's not even me if I'm saying goodnight to them. So just really trying to continually strengthen that family bond, even when they don't get to see each other as much. I give that picture to all the caseworkers and everyone involved, just as a reminder, like, this is our goal. I give that for Christmas and things like that. So those little things I find go a long way to build trust with those bio families. So then moving forward, no matter which way the case goes, I know that I've really tried to build that relationship. And then throughout the case, things like you said, sending pictures of big moments, the first day of school, the first time they ride their bike, a really great homework assignment, a friendship that the kid might talk about in a visit, anything that can be a talking point in a visit to strengthen those visit times. Sometimes you can't even ask questions because you don't know what to ask. And so by sending pictures and updates to that parent, if they let me, that now gives them a starting point for conversation to branch out. Hey, I saw a picture of you at this, or wow, you scored a soccer goal. I can't wait till I get to see you do that in person, whatever it is. Tell me more about your team. So just ways to continue to strengthen not only the relationship in the long term, that they're not missing those big moments, but also in the here and now in all of those visits. And maybe it's a phone call. If the family member is incarcerated, still trying to send pictures or mail through caseworkers, things like that. So that to me is a huge, huge piece of all of this. And when you do that, you build trust. And for me, one of the greatest blessings on the back end of the case is, my family's invested so much in this family. We would love to have a long-term relationship. And so I want to see updates as when they do go home, and I want to be a part of that, or a help when they do go home, of a respite for, we all need babysitters. And so I would love to be that babysitter and just continue to be a safe place for this family. So, and a cheerleader. So I think that doing that stuff on the front end really strengthens all of those. Some of that's selfish for me because I just want to know, I want to have a relationship in the future, but I think it kind of strengthens all those pieces.
It really is beautiful when we can show them that we're part of their team too, not just the kids' team. We're part of the whole family's team.
100%.
And I hear that from you when you speak. It's very clear. Mm-hmm. So, Brenda, when a kid's removed from your care, what does that support system look like for you as the parent? Who do you feel like were the people that were on your team that were supporting you and cheering you on?
Yeah, so my kids' paternal side of the family had been supportive since their birth. And most of that continued on through the case and has always been that way. Like that's who we do our holidays with. And even when the kids were out of my care, that's who I still got to spend a lot. It was COVID, so it looked different, but they made it a point to still include me in all of that. But then a huge thing for me also became people I worked with, because again, I said I went and got a job back at my old job, and it's a small mom and pop type of shop. So I was able to be honest with my bosses, and they were able to accommodate my work schedule to my visit schedule or other appointments that I had to do for my case. And that's not always the case, but because I had this pre-existing relationship with them and was able to be honest with them about where I was at in life, then they were huge supports for me. And they still are to this day too. And I feel like as I felt like I had people on my side who believed in me and were proud of me, I felt more comfortable talking to people about my situation as time went on, especially when reunification got closer. I kept to myself a lot during the case, because it's really hard to be like, you can't even really make mom friends or anything, because are you supposed to be, like, I have a 1 and 2-year-old, but they're with my sister. Like, there's no way to easily explain that. But once I was actually getting that unsupervised time with them and overnights, then it was able for me to feel like I could actually build healthy relationships with friends again. My social workers on my case became huge advocates and supports too, because they're the ones who got me into the field. And so I'll always be grateful for them.
Thanks for sharing. What about the flip side of that? Is there any way that people could have been more supportive or could have shown you support when you were walking through this?
I think just trusting the system and the workers in it and the judge who are making these decisions, that if reunification is near, parents are again their extended time. I know that that can be so nerve-wracking, but trust me when I say so much thought goes into this before we move parents up that to those stages. We don't want kids in harm's way. And so if a parent is getting ready to go spend their first time overnight at mom's house or dad's house, like be excited for them. Like try not to be looking out, like trying to dig up dirt about like, oh, well, what did you have to eat? And was it the most healthy meal? Or they got a scratch while they were there. Like try to be encouraging of it. If there's genuine concerns, bring it up to the case manager, but don't put the child in the middle of that worry. And if the caseworker comes to find out that everything was fine, like trust that the caseworker did their job in looking into that concern.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, because I do feel that way. I see that a lot in some foster families, unfortunately, where they just feel almost entitled to the kids and feel like they are the best place for the kids. They'll start to judge the food they eat and every single little thing. And yeah, are there ways? Again, going back to the case that we have going on right now, I sat down with the caseworker yesterday and said, hey, I would love to. We have a youth and conflict case. So it's a little different. It's not, there's not harm from mom. It's more the two of them just don't get along. And that's why he's in care. And just really showing he's been in my house for 7 months now and he's grown so much. Can I sit down and work with mom? Can I like be a mentor to her? And can I meet her for coffee once a week? And again, not showing mom like I know better, but I do have a lot of training in trauma-based parenting, and they have a lot of trauma in their past together. So just really encouraging her and showing her, hey, these are some simple things I've done in our house that I really feel would help you set your house up for success. Again, I want to see that in her, not saying my home is better, I'm better, but how can I help you get to that point where your kid can return and return safely so this doesn't happen again? And there are ways we can do that with dignity and respect and not doing it in a judgmental way either. So yeah, thank you for sharing that because it's very key. And I sadly, just see the opposite too often.
Yeah, something my coworker says a lot is we look for safe, not perfect, because no parent is ever going to be perfect. What's the best that this parent can be right now? And like hopefully that'll continue to grow when we're out of their phase. But we're not looking for a perfect home to return a child to, or no child would ever go home.
Or wouldn't be in our homes either. Kristen, do you have any inspirational stories of reunification that you could share and what that looks like in your home as a foster parent?
Yeah, we've seen all the different endings to our cases. Our most recent was she came to us when she was 3, she left when she was 6, but was back and forth with mama, who just wrestled with incarceration and addiction. And but grandma was also in the picture. And so just constantly showing up and in all those moments with mom, with grandma, really, mom was really, really good at calling every night. She wanted the relationship so badly, but had some tricky struggles. And so in the end, mom and grandma asked us to adopt her. And we said, we really believe that she belongs with your family and you can do it. And let's think through how we can make that happen. And so we just challenged them, and they wanted it, but were nervous. And so in the end, the caseworkers and the GALs and everyone involved, we put together a plan over many months towards reunification. And we even set up a little like an Amazon wish list. And I put it on Facebook and said, would you be willing to stock this home with books and toys and clothes for her school? She had to wear a uniform, and her favorite cups and all the things, the dishes she's used to. We just stocked that home, even with a sandbox and a trampoline. And she ended up going home to mom, or to grandma. Mom was incarcerated, but she went to grandma. It's been so good. She came to us. She went home exactly a year ago last week. And she came for 3 weeks. She came for a week at Christmas and 3 weeks this summer for, we call it, fun summer camp at our house. And so my kids got to just love on her all summer, but overall they're doing great. And so mom finished her time from jail, and they are all reunified, these 3 lovely people, and doing well. And so it was just one of those moments of, oh, we are so sad she's leaving. She's been with us for so long, but we know this is the right thing. And I have this awesome video when I took her to the airport. I actually flew her this summer, and I took a video of her when we got outside the airport doors, and I knew her grandma was waiting for us. And they both screamed, and she ran into her arms and had the biggest hug. And it was just confirmation that this is the right thing, families with each other. And one of those other confirmations was, grandma has all of her baby pictures, all of she was there from the beginning. And that's one of the things that I wrestle with through adoption and foster care. Some of those kids come in, they don't have the 5th grade baby picture, the high school, you're supposed to submit a baby picture and all those things. And that's so tricky. And so just the confirmation that grandma has been in the picture the whole time and just needed a little, you can do this. And it's turned out so well. And now mom is able to have a relationship too. So one of those just really incredible stories that reunification in the end was the right thing. And it's just so exciting to see that whole story come together. And we get to still be a part of the family.
Yeah, it's just so encouraging, and encouraging to hear that you didn't just say yes when that question was posed to you. Your family thought about it and knew that if it's safe and viable, that's where they should belong. They should be with their family members. Yeah, we have a story that didn't end that way. We have 2 little ones that joined our family through adoption, whose mom's rights were terminated. And I have a super close relationship with her to this day, but I will tell you, it is not easy to walk through. It's not like I would have people, once termination happened, we had people, praying for the situation and asking about the situation. And when I, posted that it was going towards adoption, I told people, do not tell us congratulations, because we don't see this as we want a prize. This is not a happy ending, the happy ending that you're thinking. Like, a lot of people see adoption like, oh yes, you guys got it. And it's like, no, this came with a lot of loss, with a lot of sadness. And I am so thankful for my relationship with her in the state of Colorado. I don't know what it's like all over the United States, but in the state of Colorado, when a parent's rights are terminated, they're terminated. Like, they have no rights to the kids. They have no rights to supports anymore. There's no such thing as open adoption. We chose that on our own, but it wasn't like this guided open adoption thing is even an option, which I think is crazy. But yeah, she struggled with substance abuse, and she was actually pregnant when the case kind of went to termination, and she decided not to appeal it because she didn't want her other child to be taken away as well, that she was pregnant with. And we had what they call a goodbye visit. There was this goodbye visit after termination. They get one last visit, which again, it makes me so sad. But we walked out together, and we actually sat at my car and chatted for almost 2 hours together with the 2 little kids. They were really little at the time, just running around being there. And she looked me in the eyes and said, I've trusted you from day one. And I said, well, why? Like, what made you trust me? And she just said, you looked me in the eyes. You made me feel like a human being when other people were judging me so much. And I just told her, I said, you will always be part of our family. You are their mom, and I'm their mom. We're their mom together. It's not me or you, it's both of us now, and we're going to do this together. And it really was like this beautiful moment that I will always cherish. But also, I see, I wish that she was at a different state at that point where the kids could have returned home. Um, but she was struggling with substance abuse. And I was able to look at her and say, I don't judge you for this because your story could have very well been my story. I did a lot of partying in college. I did a lot of stuff that I wish I didn't do. And I could have easily walked down that path. So I don't look at you and, a lot of people, it's like, well, what did their parents do? And that's a question we get all the time when a new kid comes into care. People think they have the right to ask, well, what their parents do, or why are their parents bad? Or are they this? Are they that? And, we just don't answer those questions. And we usually educate people pretty bluntly when they ask those questions, especially in front of the kids, but even at all, like that's not people's right to ask. But this judgment on biological families is such a real thing. And as foster parents, we need to figure out ways to walk alongside the families and help them feel less judged than they already do instead of adding to that judgment. So Brenna, substance abuse is like in our care, we've had about 65 kids in and out of our house through foster care, most of them through substance abuse, not all, but a lot of them, more than half of them through substance abuse and their parents. And again, I just want families to understand how they can wrap around, how they can support, how they can not fall into those judgmental lines. So can you share what are some ways that people can support those who suffer from addiction? Because it is something we see so often.
Yeah. I was going to say your exact words, like, don't judge them, like treat them as human. Because a lot of acts are already judging themselves. You don't need one more negative voice. Even you're judged by the social workers. Like, it's just a really hard world. It's hard to get help when it feels like nobody even recognizes you as a human. I feel like had I not felt like I would have been judged as a bad parent prior to removal, I probably would have asked for help and support to get a hold of everything. Because I feel like during my CPS days, I was doing a lot of handling it all alone. I didn't have a support system. I didn't have anybody I could call. It was me and the kids versus the world. And that's not how parenting should be for anybody. If I felt like I had somebody I could have called for anything, not just physical thing, but just, like having that person talk about your hard day with, or share your wins with, or isn't this so, like, I just felt very isolated from the world, regardless of how many people even knew what I was struggling with. I think on Twist side, it's important to hold boundaries with addicts. You hear all the stories of like at people with substance use disorders steal, or they do this, or they do that. So you can hold boundaries while still loving a human effectively, I think. Because that's not who they are. They have a disease. They're not that, which is why I stray away from using the term addict anyway, because those are people with. It's like I get away from the labeling because they are not what they are struggling with. So they're people with substance use disorders. Addiction changes the brain chemistry, so that's why it is classified as a disease, and I feel strongly about that. I think it's also important to stay away from slang, like tweakers or crackheads. Like in the community, it's okay for someone with substance use to joke about that with another person, but if you're not in that group of people, it's very offensive to hear somebody be called a junkie or a tweaker. So that's a simple way to support. I don't know, just be like gentle with your language and how you talk about people struggling with it.
Brenna, I love what you just said, and I think that from the foster parent side, I probably could have done a better job, but one thing that I really try to do is just constantly say, hey, I'm so proud of you, and you can do this. I think that's one of the last couple things I'd always say whenever I leave a visit, like, hey, I'm so proud of you. You can do this. Like, we're cheering for you, just reminding them that we're in their corner and that words go a long way. And so the
They
beautiful
really do.
of texting and, all the things that even every time I just thought of them, like, hey, I just want you to know I'm thinking about you and I'm rooting for you today.
Yeah.
You've got this.
Like, and that's helped. I feel like that's gotten me to where I am in life today, not just like professionally, but just like as a human. 5 years ago, I didn't have any self-confidence in myself, any self-worth in myself. But the more people have voices I had in my ear speaking those things to me made me believe those things about myself. Like hearing my judge say he's proud of me, that is something I'll think about frequently. Like that's how hard hearing attorneys, like anybody who said it, like that literally puts me on the biggest high for the day. And that's things I never heard 5 years ago. So I feel like even if children aren't removed yet, and you just see any mom that's struggling, regardless of what it's with, like just being small words of encouragement can go a long way and instill like an individual's ability to build trust, to ask for help for things, if that makes sense.
And I'm sure it's encouraged you now, like when you work with families, to be that encouragement that you need to hear to get that 5 per day of just that positive reinforcement.
Yes, I try. I try to be the biggest cheerleader I can be.
Kristen, one thing I'm sure you hear all the time that I get all the time is I can never foster because I'd get too attached and then they have to return home. We want families who are willing to get too attached and have those open arms when reunification happens. How do you handle the dichotomy and that encouragement that you could give to other families of really, it can be both. It's not like this or this. It can be this beautiful thing. How would you encourage families in thinking about that?
Yeah, I used to say this I used to teach once a month training for new foster and kinship parents for the county. And before we closed out, I always said this. And I said, when you become a foster parent, everyone is going to say, I could never do that. I'd get too attached. And you need a one-liner. And the thing that I always say is, gosh, that would make you the perfect foster parent. Because no one wants to be loved just a little bit. Nobody wants to be loved with a half a heart person. They want someone that's all in. Well, no matter what your relationship is in your life, you don't want someone that's just like, meh. And so I would always say that is exactly what makes the perfect foster parent if you feel like you'd be too attached. And really, that's what everyone in the case needs, is to be loved wholeheartedly and with everything that you have. And just like, and we say, any kiddo that comes into my home is now, treated like everyone else. So if everybody gets 5 Christmas presents, if my kids get 5 Christmas presents, everyone gets 5 Christmas presents, whatever it is. If you're playing sports, they're playing sports. And so just that idea of giving it all, just like they are anyone else in my family. But that is what we are called to do, is to love with your whole heart. Nobody wants to be just loved a little bit. And then it's just a great opportunity to talk about that future relationship. Gosh, I hope that when they do leave, that I've loved everyone on the case so well that I do get to have that forever relationship with them, that they're not like, bye, thanks for nothing. I'd rather want them to be like, oh, can we keep hanging out? And can you be a babysitter or a backup or someone I can call when I don't know what to do? So that is something that people, I think, use as a reason to not jump in and get dirty, so to speak, like just that they, it really is the reason we want people in any role, in anything. I want people on my team in my office who are going to be all in. So that's kind of my one-liner.
Perfectly said. Yes. Well, I have loved this conversation. It is so vital. And I think all foster families need to listen to this and understand perspective and understand how we can show more empathy and just compassion and that non-judgmental spirit. Before we close, is there anything either of you two want to share that you haven't shared yet on this topic, or anything you'd like to say?
Kristen?
I'll go first. I think there's always so many tips and tricks to this, and one thing that there's two things that I do with kiddos when they come into our home. We call it a save it box. Some people call it there's another word in the foster world, but we buy like almost like a plastic sweater box that goes under their bed, and that is theirs. No one else gets to look in there, and that is any notes from their parent, any pictures, any awards, that is theirs to take with them. That's their stuff. And that has become just a gift as well, a special place for anything that is given, a Christmas present, birthday present from their bio family, keepsakes, that they know is sacred to them. And so that has really been a gift to our kiddos. And the other thing I do is I take all the pictures of their time with us, whether it's 24 hours or 4 years. I print a book and I hand that to them, and I always put my email and my phone number and Sharpie in the back. And that's just hey, this is a reminder, but within that, any pictures that I took of them with siblings, with bio family, grandparents, anyone that we met is also in that photo album. And that just shows that like we were just a piece of what was going on in your story. We were just a season. And we want to continue that season with you, and so that's just another thing to hand with them when they are reunified. And it's just, again, I even put pictures of myself with the bio family, the bio parent. One time we celebrated the birthday of one of the mom, and we had this huge party in the park for her, and gifts and balloons and cake, and those pictures are in those photo albums, so things like that, again, it's not just I want to forget this season. This was a strengthening season, and we're just an extension of your family now. That's just two tangible ways that you can really end well, close out that chapter, that season with that family, and hopefully continue on.
I just wanted to say thank you to any current, former, or prospective foster parents that have been willing to take even the smallest steps to build a relationship with parents. I think it is incredibly important and can play a huge impact on the future of that family. Whether it's just this period of time or you stay in their life for years to come, the parent will be able to remember the role you played, whether that was a positive one, an absent one, a negative. That's part of their story that they'll remember forever, and that the family will remember forever. So I just wanted to say thank you to anyone who has done things like Courtney and Kristen said today, because that is really amazing.
Yeah, again, thank you for sharing, both of you, both your perspectives. If you are watching this, I encourage you to follow people like Brenna, to hear their side of the story. You want to not just hear foster parents' perspectives. I encourage you to follow people or find people that are former foster youth that can speak into what it was like to be in care, what you can do best to be a better foster parent. And of course, people like Brenna who had their kids removed, and hearing their side so you can walk along these families better. As I said earlier, I've followed Brenna on social media for a while now, so I kind of knew her story. I've been encouraged by it. I have taken a lot away as a foster mom of how I can do things better. So Brenna, if you don't mind sharing, can you share how people can find you and follow you so they can be inspired as I have been?
Yeah, my Instagram handle is Hunter_Brenna. So that's HUNTER_BRENNA. I didn't share until my case was closed. And then I was like, saw the huge community of foster parents who were all sharing there. So I was like, we need somebody to share what it's like on the other side. Not that there's any side is wrong, but that's why I chose to share.
Love it. Thanks again, you two, for sharing. This is a vital conversation, as I've shared, and I hope a lot of people watch and listen and learn from you two, who are two of the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you just thoroughly loved that conversation that I got to have with Kristen and Brenna. Just amazing. Just hearing what Brenna has gone through, hearing how Kristen wraps her own biological families, just great human beings with a lot of things that we can learn from. Right now we're going to transition into another interview. As we've been saying, at the heart of every foster care story lies the ultimate goal of reunification. This is the powerful journey of Ashley Darrow and her son Ashton finding their way back to each other. Her resilience and the dedication of those in the system came together to create a path back to them being a family. I want you to witness how their commitment and other people around them, how their commitment to engage in reunification, how it did, and it can help a family heal. It can change a child's future trajectory forever. You have a big important role in this, and part of that is to really encourage and engage with and cheerlead these parents who are going through hard things. That is part of our role. So listen to this next story, and then at the very end, stay on so you can hear more about how you can get your CU credit for being here today.
My name is Ashley Darrow, and my son's name is Ashton. We live in Lakeland, Florida. I spent my 21st birthday in the neuro ICU. I'm also a single mom. I almost died, and here I have a child, and my father's not in the pictures. Plus my own childhood, I had all this trauma that I never healed from, never even dealt with just trying to forget all the bad things. And I was a prime picking for an addiction, and no awareness, no nothing, no education on it. And I'm just taking it because I'm not just in pain physically, I'm in pain emotionally, mentally. Over the course of 6 years, it became a horrible addiction. And my poor son was there through the whole thing. So by the end of it, I was also using methamphetamines, alcohol, and painkillers all at the same time. The dysfunction that came with it, just moving from house to house, and my son being with me and not having a stable environment. I'm not that coherent of a mom. During this time, my mental health was tanking because of the drugs. And anyways, I take him to the doctor, and they kind of sent me home. And then I went to the police station to file a report, and they were like, go home, you're not in a condition to be here, because I was under the influence. But I ended up taking him to the emergency room, trying to get someone to pay attention to what I'm saying here. This is, my son. And that same doctor was at the hospital that night, and he knew my condition, and he saw me with my son, and he immediately called DCF. So before I knew it, there was a room full of cops and DCF workers, and one cop in particular was very cruel to me. But even then, looking back now, I'm like, today, I'm thankful, because he made me so mad, made me want to fight harder, I'm like, I'm gonna keep fighting. They tried to get a hold of family, but thank God he intervened there, because I didn't have healthy family. They were just as sick as I was, mentally, emotionally, they had their own addictions and things. And he was placed into the foster care system the next day. It was in the wee hours of the morning, and they were waiting on somebody to come and see if somebody would come get him. And it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I knew they were getting ready to come, and he was sleeping, and I didn't want to wake him up to say goodbye, because I thought, I don't know if it was selfish on my part. What would I say to him? So while he was sleeping, I went ahead and left and just let them come and get him. So that was kind of where I was at. And I think the whole next day I laid in bed and cried, and had my big, you have to process this. Then I couldn't see that it was good, but where I sit now, yeah, I know it was intervention, and it was good. I think he was in between 5 and 6. I think there's a natural part of us that wants to block out trauma, and we do it not even intentionally. With the already struggling mental health that I'm having, I go into the courtroom, and I knew inside, deep down, I knew this is going to be the hardest day of my life. But I just didn't know how hard that was going to be. When you are in a courtroom full of people and they talk about how messed up your life is, everything. You know, everything you think you've hid, everything you've ran from, everything you've done, it's all out there because they've investigated, they've talked to people. I can see why people don't go and get their kids back. If we all walked into a courtroom where they said all of the messed up things of our life, a lot of us couldn't handle that. I loved him with everything, every ounce of me. And if I had to go in that courtroom and hear all those things, well, by God, I was going to do it if it meant to be with him and to fight for him. But yeah, after that, the shame says you're not good enough. You know, you never will be. I didn't know what that was, and I didn't know what it stood for, why. I had no knowledge of any of this, so I'm completely blind walking into the entire situation, like of what the process was going to look like. And I didn't have people in my life to help walk me through it. I had no family support. I'm literally just on my own. You show up because my kid, I don't want to lose him, you know, so you show up and you do whatever they say. I was told he'd be placed in with foster parents and that they would be in touch with me about visits and whatnot. You're waiting for the people in the system to determine your life. And so I was just like patiently waiting for whatever was next. I remember having my first visit. I remember meeting them for the first time. At that point, everybody just looks like they're the DCF worker. So I didn't acknowledge that they literally had him in their home. But I think in time, having those supervised visits, I was able to catch glimpses of interaction with them. It was a couple painful visits where the interaction was very rocky, and my son was their first placement. They were brand new too, so they didn't know what they were getting into either. So things got more clear where I could understand once we started having the panel groups and where, you know, you had the guardian ad litem and you had the DCF worker and the parents are in there and everybody, there's like the round table. But this round table was different than the courtroom. The courtroom was tough, but this was more supportive. It felt more like I had a team of people. Like I said, I had no support, so that round table was my support. The DCF worker, she was very much a person of faith. Her belief in me was like, I needed that. I mean, I had thoughts, maybe he's better off with a family that can do things for him that I couldn't. I can't, you know, my thought life was always limiting. I couldn't quite get where everybody else got. You know, shame told me that I was always going to be the bubble gum on the bottom of everyone else's shoe. I felt belief for me in that room. And it helped me to empower me. I like black and white paper. Give me something written and I can check the boxes. I'm pretty good at that. So that case plan was my boxes to check. And so that's what I needed, the support in that room. And that's where I got different glimpses of the foster parents too, how they would, you know, give me updates on how he was doing. And we started to get more comfortable in the interaction. And I do need help with my addiction. I need to get into somewhere or find something that can help work for me. I think the biggest shift was not just the case plan and not the people in the room, but I remember that the foster family invited me to their church. You know, I knew they would know who I was when I came in. You know, I probably stuck out like a sore thumb. But it was for Mother's Day. And he did a Mother's Day verse in front of the entire church. And they helped him do that. And that let me know they were for me and for him both. I wasn't the bad guy. You know, that's when it kind of changed, I guess, for me. At this point, I'd been in 6 years. So it was, you know, I was pretty stuck in that lifestyle and that thing. And I knew that if I didn't change people, places, and things thoroughly, I wasn't going to make it. I need more help than just this. I'm never going to be able to overcome. And so I did. And I was in a year-long program that was inpatient. And they were all about, you know, reunification. They gave you parenting classes. They helped you meet your requirements. So that was the really awesome thing about this program. They gave me my parenting classes. They had them on their campus where, you know, the person would come in, teach the parenting classes. So I was right there. They made sure I went. They made us both a scrapbook of him and his time there and the different little milestones that he was hitting. Even, when he was with them, he gave his heart to Jesus, and he told them, I want to be saved. How do you even say thank you for that, right? So their impacts were amazing. I had never created a healthy family unit at that point. So just seeing how they operated, I needed a role model, something to show me what healthy family looked like. And I was able to see that through how they lived, how they interacted, what they did. And that impacted me the most. Is like, I want to be a person who loves like that. But that kind of love is just, it's life-changing. Before I actually graduated out of the program, my biological father, who I didn't have a relationship with, he's actually stepped in to take over custody or temporary custody to try and help in the situation. And at first I was angry because I didn't know him, but he had made a bunch of life changes and he was on a good track and wanted also to restore and repair the stuff with him and I. And so he stepped in and him and his wife got temporary guardianship. The plan began to unfold that, when I graduated, I would move to Florida because we were in Georgia at the time. So now I had to get a job and get stable income and stable housing and show that I could do that for, the next 6 months. So going and moving with my father and living with him and being reunified with my son. I remember the day, and now he's 17 and, he tells the story. He even wrote me a poem one year about this day that, he remembers because he would mark the days on his calendar with X's. He was outside on his bike, and he was riding it and he looked over and saw me and I got out of the car and he just ran, he threw his helmet off, he threw everything. He was like, Mama, and by this time it had been a total of almost 2 years. It's not an easy process or it's something that happens overnight. I wanted it to happen overnight, but I thank God it didn't because I needed to heal in order to be able to go and be the parent that he needed. I immediately put my son and I into therapy and, because I knew there was going to be a journey there, and I petitioned the court. They said, just call and you'll get on the case and you bring all your information to show us what you've done and how you worked your case plan. I went in the courtroom and that day was a lot different than the first time. That day there was praise. That day there was encouragement. That day it was a whole different feel. It was beautiful. It was redemptive. For me, my faith carried me through. Without that, I just don't know if I would have made it. Maybe the shame would have overtaken me. Maybe I would have ran. Maybe I would have just given up. I don't know. But holding on to the faith and having people support and believe and just not giving up at all costs, even when it's overwhelming. The thing that I look back is the foster parents showed up and were willing to do their part. I showed up and I was willing to do my part. The people that were in the panel of that room, they showed up to do their part. The people in the courtroom both times showed up to do their part. And in all of that, and for me, God overseeing the entire process in my story, we had everything we need to succeed. As broken as it was, as flawed as it might be, we can pick it apart, we can say all these things, but when everybody shows up to the table and does their part, it works. It does. And because of that, that's our story, and if that was never given to me, if that was never, I wasn't confronted with that, like I said, the losing him and going through that process in the middle of it was, it was hard. It was hard, it was embarrassing, it was shameful, it was all of these things, but it's what I needed. It was the help that I needed. I needed a system. I needed something. I needed support. I needed guidance. And for me, the system was my guidance. And I took it, walked through the process, and on the other side of it, here I am. And if we all come to the table and we all just do the part that, we're assigned to play, something like this can happen. Reunification and beauty from a situation that looked like ash. So I guess that's my encouragement, is for foster parents, you play a huge part. For me, it was not exiling me, even in my brokenness and in the midst of my state of addiction, or how mentally, if I was there or not, or if I was on point or not, or what they were going to get, they still continued to reach and include. They continued to give pictures. They continued to update to make me feel like I was still his mom, and they honored the relationship that we had, and they did everything that they were allowed to do. I'm grateful that, no matter how far my life evolves from that time, and all the whole experience of the system and everything that happened, and not just with me, but also with my son, the impacts are just, they're lasting. And they make it different. Just the people that make it up, the hearts of the people. It's like, it's overwhelming. Every broken system needs those kind of hearts that, fill in the gaps of the broken places.
I hope that you thoroughly enjoyed this webinar. I hope you heard from listening from Kristen and Brenna and Ashley. I hope you are encouraged as a foster family or potential foster family to really stick with these families and be the cheerleader that they need. Please note that we have other great conversations like this. We have other free online webinars. You may see some faces on the screen right now that you recognize, and these people are all on some of our past webinars that you can find at FosterCon.org. It takes substantial time, energy, resources, and money to curate content like this. If you stand behind our mission and you want to see us to continually have these webinars like this for free, please consider giving a tax-deductible donation to America's Kids Belong. You can do that at americaskidsbelong.org. And if you are needing CE credit for this webinar, go to FosterCon.org. So go back where you got here from, FosterCon.org, fill out the form that's there, and you will get a certificate. Please note that those forms, you fill it out, those forms come to my email, I create your certificate, and I send it back to you. So it might take me a little bit. I guarantee you'll have it within a week, probably sooner. But fill out that form and I will get a certificate for you of being here and showing that you were here with us. Thanks again for joining us. Again, I hope you loved this conversation. We want to improve the experiences and outcomes for kids in care, and one way we can do that is by sharing great conversations like these ones that we had. Again, thanks for being here. Have a great day.